Welcome to Writers on Writers, a virtual broadcast of writers talking to other writers about, wait for it, writing. I am your host, writer Danielle Bannister, and this month's theme is fantasy. And because of that, we have a special guest today, Amy Miles. She is the writer of all things fantasy. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you very much.
I know that this pains you to be on video. Video is not something that you enjoy doing, so.
No, but I love you, so you're welcome.
I roped you into doing this. Thank you so much for being willing. I promise it will be fun. I think that it should be noted that you and I actually know each other quite well. We have been friends since I'm going to say about 2011. That's when my first book, Pulled, came out. And at the time, I remember I was looking for people to sort of review my book. And somehow in Google searching, I came upon you. You were reviewing books at the time. You had just basically started writing as well. And I said, hey, would you read my book and review it? And then we just started chatting every day about writing and about books. And a friendship was born. Do you remember
fake.
that?
I do. And I have no clue how we actually officially found each other.
Yeah.
It was meant to be.
It was meant to be. And since we sort of, you write primarily fantasy stuff. You do write in other genres, and we'll tap into that in a little bit. But you is, I would say, is primarily a fantasy writer, and I am not primarily a fantasy writer. I write, romance and touchy-feely stuff that you really don't enjoy. You like, cutting up the people and making them all bloody. And I can't remember how that came to be, but we decided that we should co-write a book together. Do you remember how that came to be?
I think we were crazy. And I think it was more of I figured I could learn from you and you could learn from me. So we just kind of threw something together and it snowballed from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember thinking, trying to mesh our two styles together, not necessarily come up with something else, but to keep you writing fantasy and to keep me writing romance. Is there a reason that those two genres can't coexist in such a world? And so we set our series here, this lovely series here, Netherworld, Hollow Earth, and Isle of Glass. Yeah, that's like it's backwards. We set that in sort of a fantasy world, but we threaded in some heavy romantic themes within it to try to push that along. So I think we challenged each other, because there were definitely times when I would have to write a fantasy scene that involved battles or fights, and I'd be like, I don't want to.
Yeah, and you made me the gushy, which I hated.
Yes. So we definitely had to push each other way outside of our comfort zone.
Yes.
Now, here's another interesting thing that I think is bizarre. You live in South Carolina, and I live in Maine, but that did not stop us from writing an entire trilogy together. I mean, how did we end up pulling that off? Do you like what do we do that actually made that work, do you think?
Well, we took a cruise, which helped.
That's what we actually did.
We wrote an entire draft on a cruise, which was awesome. The ice cream kept us going.
Yes.
We flew back and forth a couple times. I came up to yours a couple times. You came down here. And then we did a lot of FaceTime, and we were very obsessive with creating the outline, which then of course I had to change repeatedly because that's who I am. I think you wanted to kill me a few times.
I just kept saying ripples.
Yes, but ripples can be good because the stories did improve as they went along.
They did. But it's true. If you change one tiny thing, that ripple effects all the way down the line. But yeah.
Well, and for our book, you wrote the male lead who was a human, right, and then I wrote the female fantasy lead. So we had two different worlds that we had ripples in, which made it a little more complicated. So we also wrote at different times because my schedule was insane. And, with all my health issues and stuff, you would write ahead.
Yep.
And then I would come up with a brilliant idea and you would have to rewrite your chapters.
It's
or
true.
We would throw something out or we would add something in. So, it took us about a year per book just because of all of the changes that we made. We tended to get together. It was usually the second draft, I think, is when we got together.
Yeah.
We would do the horrible first draft, and then we would get together and you would lay out a physical timeline on your carpet so we could actually plot out each scene, and we would realize the first draft was complete crap and we would have to rewrite it.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was amazing just in those like short weeks, in that week on the cruise and the weeks that we flew back and forth with each other, how much we were able to get done. I was just always floored by how much we were able. I mean, we worked. I mean, I think a lot of people, when we said we're going to take a cruise and write a book together, that people were like, yeah, sure you are. We worked.
We did.
We sat in our cabin and we put in the time. We broke for lunches and dinners, but we sat there and we hammered it out, and we did. We had to make a really intense outline because we were writing at different times, and it was important that we each understood what story we were telling, and we couldn't let the muse go off track too much, because then that just sets everything off. So and we also had, go ahead.
I would say it was a lot easier when we were in the same room because we could bounce ideas off each other right there. It was in the moment instead of me writing at night, you writing first thing in the morning and having to wait for answers. That definitely helped us speed things up again.
Yeah, and we had like set hours that we would write from this time. We would break for lunch. We would have our chip break. And then at dinner we would stop. We would have dinner, and that would be the end of our work day. And then we'd relax.
Watch Outlander.
With Outlander, yes, exactly. Yes. Or on the cruise,
which was not bloody enough. It was not bloody enough. I'm sorry, you lied.
The first season, it gets bloodier. It gets bloodier. Anyway, moving on. In talking about your other books, can you talk to us a little bit about your Forbidden series? Because that is the series that really launched you as an author. What are those books about? And, is that series done? Is there more along the way? Like, what can you tell us about that series?
Yeah, so they've actually been rebranded. Pretty new covers in the background. This series, there they are. This series actually began because I was annoyed with Twilight, honestly. I was tired of sparkly vampires and no fighting at all. I'm like, okay, if you're going to be evil, there needs to be fighting. So when I created mine, I wanted to kind of showcase the good and the evil and how it's a choice a lot of times. And evil isn't necessarily like you're born evil. It's a progression of steps that you allow yourself to take. And so in my series, my vampires, they don't kill people and drink their blood for food. It's almost like it becomes an addiction for them, and it gives them this high that makes them feel powerful. It helps them regenerate. But it's a choice if they want to be evil or not. And so my main girl, Rosalind, has to battle that. She's been on both sides of being evil, being good, and finding redemption and trying to basically make the world a better place. The original series that starts with Forbidden is set in modern day. I did go back and do a prequel series, which I'm in the process of finishing now, and it is set in like 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, back when Romania wasn't even Romania. So unfortunately, I had to do a whole lot of research on that one. I hadn't planned on doing. But the basis of the story, I wanted to dig into, where did vampires come from? How did they start? Why are they evil? Why are they immortal? Where did all that come from? Because a lot of times when I would go to the library and Twilight was huge, everything was so cliche and it drove me crazy. So I wanted to come up with some little twists on it. So in my book, I basically make fun of the cliches. I was a huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. Oh my gosh, best show ever, loved it. And now I'm a huge Van Helsing fan, which is very dark and raw and wonderful. So I kind of just blended my take on trying to fix Twilight. And I know that you're a huge Twilight fan.
I am. And I like it honestly, because it's not violent and gross. I like it for the other reasons that you hate it. So
you like the gushy part.
We are so opposite in so many ways. So
we are. And I honestly wonder every day why we are such good friends.
It's true.
But it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of another opposite, good segue. One of the things that you really love about fantasy writing, and I really hate about the fantasy writing, is that sort of world building idea. For those who might not be familiar with, what we mean by world building, what does that mean, and why do you enjoy it so much?
So world building is basically creating the worlds for your world, and then it's like creating lore. So like my vampires don't match up with Hollywood vampires. So you make the rules and then you break them, which is fun. So it's inserting a lot of the sensory things that romance writers don't really focus on, like you. You focus more on dialogue because that's what builds the romance. For fantasy, it's very much, you want the creepy fog at nighttime. You want the thrills and the chills. You want the taste, the textures. You want all of that stuff.
The blood and the guts.
That too. But that's what makes fantasy feel real. And I was actually kind of laughing when I was looking through some of my older books, and I was like, I do get kind of graphic. But at the same time, that's my trying to get readers to feel like they're in that scene. And sometimes I have readers who are like, okay, I had to set it down for a minute. But fantasy doesn't have to be, fake. It can be realistic just in a fantasy world that you've built. So for me, it's the teeny tiny little details that all of a sudden you'll realize later, wow, that was actually crucial information. But at the time you think, oh, it's no big deal. So I don't focus so much on dialogue. It's more the action and the scene that sets the stage.
Right. Which was a very fun dynamic when we were writing, because you would write chapters that were like 5,000 words long, and I wrote chapters that were like 2,000 words. We're like, okay, we've got to agree on a happy medium.
Yes. Well, and I think that's why, we had you do the human world, because people know what the human world looks like. And then
right. I didn't have to make that up.
Right. So you were able to focus on the mushy gushy crap that I hated. Right. And I was able to build Netherworld and, all of the fun stuff.
Make the Banshees and the Reapers and
exactly. And it used both of our skill sets, but at the same time, it still forced us to cross over. Yeah. So you made me get gushy. I didn't like it.
Yeah, you're welcome. You and even in our trilogy, you wrote some pretty graphic, disgusting description that I still wrinkle my nose up even after all of the times that I've read this in drafts. What draws you to writing so violent? Because in person you are quite delightful, and you're not as stabby as your characters are. So explain this.
So I don't think I'm actually going, like, I'm not gory, in my opinion.
I beg to differ.
I'm not going for a gore factor. Like I said, I'm going for realism. And let's be honest, battle scenes, they're not nice and neat and pretty, and there's not rose petals everywhere. They're supposed to be intense. So I want my readers to be so focused on what's happening in the moment that, you know, if there's a kid screaming in the background while they're running around, that they're going to be so focused on the battle that that poor kid's just going to be hungry for a little while, you know. And it's easy when there's less description to pull yourself out. But when you are so immersed in the action, you have to know what happens next. And you're terrified of, okay, who's she going to kill? Because I like to kill people.
Yes, you do.
I do. And I have taken out some pretty main characters. And I think that that builds that sense of anticipation and fear in my readers, because they're like, nobody's safe in my books.
Yeah.
So I think that that, you know, just kind of helps with the sensory. You know, I want them to feel, I want them to touch, I want them to smell the blood on the air if it's a battle scene.
And see the toes falling off and sticking into the boards as it walks. Just, I don't want it.
It happens. I mean, I'm sorry. You want the fantasy, don't you?
Don't like that at all.
I like realistic fantasy.
Oh, goodness. So I want to shift gears a little bit just to get away from the grossness. Okay. I want to talk to you a little bit about your process as a writer. Do you tend to follow the same path for every book? Does it vary? Are you a pantser? Are you a plotter? Like, what's sort of your process like from the idea to publish?
My process has actually changed over the years. When I first wrote Forbidden, it was totally pantsing. I knew the beginning, I knew the end, everything in the middle was up for grabs. And I'm the type of writer that if I know what's coming, I'm bored. Like, I need to experience the book as my reader experiences it. And with those first few books, thank God my brain was able to connect all of the pieces, because I would read it back and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I created that, but I don't remember creating that. As I've gone along and I'm older and my brain sucks, I have to do more plotting now. But I find as soon as I get too detailed, I'm bored. You know, I know the story, so I don't need to write it now. So I still have to be very careful with how in depth I go, which is probably why when we co-wrote, I was constantly changing things, because I was like, okay, yeah, that storyline's played out. Let's try something new. So I guess my process is just, I don't know. I mean, some of my ideas literally come from dreams, and it'll be just like a snippet of a scene that will become a full-length book. And I guess I don't really plan it. It's just, and a lot of people will get mad at me because I kill characters, and they'll say, well, you did that on purpose. Actually, no, I didn't. Yeah. It's just, that's the natural progression that the book took. So I'm sorry. You know, and I cry too when I kill characters, but then I realize that that's what has to happen because of how the book is laid out. I will never kill a character just willy-nilly. There has to be a reason for it. And in my Age of the Fallen series, I killed a main character, and I had a lot of people who were really mad at me, and I was mad at me too, because I loved, that was actually my favorite character, and I killed this person.
Yeah.
And, you know, I cried for days over that. And I don't think readers realize that we connect so personally with our characters that we've lost that person. It's like a real person to us. Yeah. So we're not cruel just to them. We're cruel to ourselves too. So yeah, I think I started out as a pantser, and as my craft grew, as my brain died, you know, I reached a point of where I have to take notes, and now I have a big binder full of all my notes. You know, because sometimes there's a year or two in between writing series when you write multiple books, and I constantly have to ask my readers, I'm like, hey, what color was this character's eyes? I don't remember. And they know better than I do, because I've written other books.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'm a blend now. I still need
in that way
surprise.
we are the same, because I started out very much the same way, pantsing it, no outlines whatsoever. But now, now I definitely have a blend of both. Like I'll have an outline, but I won't be like insanely detailed. It'll be like I think this is what's going to happen in this particular beat now, but that's subject to change but at least there's a direction now, and it's not just wandering on a road hoping that we find the finish line.
Well, and I think you also have to give yourself permission to change the outline. If something feels right, you go with it.
Yes.
And there have been times that I have completely deleted entire books because it just didn't feel right.
Yep.
You know, so you learn and you adapt, and not every book is going to feel the same. Some characters speak louder than others. Sometimes you got to wait for a month and beg and plead that character to finally speak. And of course, they want to speak at 2 a.m. when you're trying to sleep, or you're in a shower and you can't write.
Or driving. I did all of the times that you're not really ready for the muse to speak. Exactly. That's when she comes. What are your favorite and least favorite parts of our writing? Do you have things that you're like, I can't wait to do this, or I hate this? Do you have things?
So this is where you and I really differ. I hate the first draft. I hate it. You give me something that's already written and I can edit it, and I love it. You hate edits.
I hate it with a passion.
Yes. And for me, it's harder for me to get the words on the paper to begin with than it is to fix them later. So I hate first drafts. I really do. And which is weird because I love the world building. I love getting to know the characters, but I feel like it's not until that third or fourth draft that I truly know the characters. So when I'm first writing them, they feel very flat, boxy, you know, it's just, they're not very fun. Right. And as you go along with them, all of a sudden you can kind of gel with how quirky they are. You can get into their voice easier. I swear when we wrote Netherworld, I spoke with an Irish accent for days while we were writing it, because I would read it out loud to myself and I was like, well, I got to get in character. So, and I have a terrible Irish accent. I'm not gonna lie. But
same. When I read it still, I have my terrible accents in my head for sure.
Yeah. You know, and that's one thing with my process that's changed is I used to do paper edits. Now I do Audible edits. So I will actually load it to my Kindle and have it read it back to me, because I can hear things that I wouldn't necessarily see when I was reading it. So
one
for
thing
me,
I haven't done that yet.
That really helps me, especially finding typos, because it's that robotic voice that drives you crazy, and it will kind of hiccup and it catches those things. The other thing I do, which you taught me, is to read the book backwards.
Yeah.
Then that way because then you're not focused on the story, because I'll get drawn into my own story. I'm like, oh, this is really good. I'm loving this.
Exactly.
And I forget to edit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And your brain will correct for you. It'll just automatically, it knows the patterns. It knows what it's supposed to be. It won't pick it up. So if you're reading it backwards, it feels you're not really following a story anymore. You're it's confusing. But I find myself when I do that, I'm like, wait, did I talk about that yet? Or I have to do that like at the very end, where I know that the plot makes sense. Don't second guess the plot. Plot works.
Well, that's one of the problems we had when we wrote Netherworld. Well, all three books, really. We had so many different drafts that we couldn't remember, did we put that in the new draft, or was it from an old draft?
Was that just an idea we talked about and then threw away? It's true. It's true. That was really hard, because we bounced off a lot of ideas with that particular series. Now, you write books that are outside of the fantasy genre as well. What other genres do you write? And is there a genre of all those that you write that you prefer writing over others, or are they each special in their own way?
Fantasy is my first love. It's what I love to read. It's what I love to write. Netflix, my husband's like, all it is fantasy. I'm like, yeah, that's what I love. So that's pretty much what I focus on. I've dabbled in romance and got bored and I got bored and I started dropping bodies. So it became a romantic suspense. I have done zombies, which I love. I've got an adult series, and then I'm in the process of working on the young adult series. So it's a little cleaner. It's in the same world, but in separate cities. So they kind of overlap, which is kind of cool. I've done some kids books with my son, which has been a really great process. We've got 5 books now. One is in the process of being published. And that was a lot of fun because my son would tell me his ideas and sit right next to me. And I'd say, okay, what does this person look like? What are they wearing? You know, what I got him to do sensory stuff by asking him, okay, what does this look like? You know, and I was able to put in some childlike humor. And as soon as he would laugh, I knew I was good. So there's some fat cats and fart jokes and,
as
stuff
there
for young
should
kids.
be.
Yes. So that was a real delight to do that with my son. He's now working on a new book, which is kind of like your virtual reality, and he's way up here. Like, I don't get all of that stuff. So he's in research mode.
Nothing wrong with that.
Player One. He loved that movie. That's his favorite movie. So he wanted to write something like that. And I'm like, okay, buddy, you do the research and I'll help you write it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, how many books do you actually have out now? Do you even know? If you had to make a guess.
I have written 28. I don't know how many are actually published at this point. I've got several that are in the process of editing. I had some that I wrote for an agent that never came to light. And I'm planning on revamping them at some point in all my spare time.
Right.
Yeah, so I've done 28, but I think I've got around 20 that are actually published.
Only 20. Slacker.
I feel like a slacker right now.
Of those 20, if somebody was unfamiliar with you as a writer, is there one that you would say, you know what? Start here. This is a good one that gives you a good taste of sort of my style of writing, or is it just really dependent on the type of book they like?
Yeah, it really depends on the genre. For me, I absolutely love my book, Jasper, which was the romance turned not romance, because it does have a blend. It's got suspense in it. It's got some romance. It's got some sexy scenes.
Yes, it does.
And for me, that one has a huge twist. So it's almost like a blend of a mystery as well. And so far, nobody has figured it out. So I'm like, yay, I did good. And I keep asking, and people are like, oh, I didn't see that coming. But now when they go back, they're like, oh, you did weave in the clues. And I'm like, yeah, I did that. I'm proud of that one. But I mean, for fantasy based, I am very insecure about Forbidden, because it was my first book, but it is
I feel you.
It's the most popular book. That whole series has had over 4 million downloads. Some reason
4 million people can't be wrong. There must be something redeemable about that first book.
No, I mean, it's a great series. It's just, as the author and knowing it was my first book, I see the flaws.
I hear you.
But people become rabid fans of it, and I love them for it. It's just, I've got my own issues with the books. I've got a sci-fi fantasy series that is my baby. That was actually my first book that I wrote. And the first time I wrote it, it was about 600,000 words. And somebody wisely told me to cut it down, because that was just
surprised that it was that long.
Yeah.
Usually you're so economical.
I do like to write big chapters. Yeah, so that one's actually my baby. I love that one. And then of course my zombies. Again, I'm a huge Walking Dead fan. I love Z Nation. I'm so sad they canceled that one. But I had to do a twist. I used to be terrified of zombies. Full on, like I couldn't even watch the first episode of Walking Dead because I was sure that something was going to jump out and get them. And Rick's just like, no, you're just an author and you're thinking the worst things possible. So when I started writing this book, I didn't do it for me. I did it for my graphic designers who were huge zombie fans. I'm like, okay, how do I write zombies without, freaking me out? Because the whole idea of something gnawing on my arm, okay, that's my cutoff. I can't do that.
But you can hack off the arm. It's just we can't bite the arm. I see. There's a line.
If it's gone, it's fine. It's just if I'm looking at something eating my arm, there's a problem. So, I've got my limits too.
You have confusing lines.
I really do. And now I'm like, go for it. It's awesome. So, I've become desensitized to zombies. So, my Withered series is my take on zombies, and they evolve and they become super creepy. And I kind of blend a few different versions of zombies together, which I think makes it really awesome. So I don't know. It really just depends on what people like to read. I've got one other one that I do really love. And it's my From the Embers, and it was part of the Havenwood Falls series. And I got to write a Phoenix, and she's just awesome. Like, I love that one. There's a monster fight club in it, and there's some romance. I had to throw that in there. But she's very fiery. She's kind of like who I wish I could be. So I write very strong female leads, and which makes it difficult when you write, human males, like in our Netherworld series. You kept having to remind me that she needed her guy. So it really just depends on what you like to read. I've got multiple genres, so
you have a little something for everybody. You're like a sampler pack of chocolate, but in book form.
Yes, but all of them are good.
They are. It just depends on what you like in the center: nougat or bloody cherry filling.
That is true. Yes.
Now, one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on this month, December, was so that we could plug our box set of our 3 books. Nope, this way.
That way.
3 books that are coming up on January 5th. We have bundled them all together so that people could just submerge themselves into the whole journey. Is there anything you want to tell us about the box set, or I don't know, anything else that I haven't already said? My brain is mush too.
I think that it's hard for some people to switch genres. They get stuck in their preferred genre. But even though Netherworld is fantasy based, a lot of people are like, well, it's also kind of mythology, but we pulled off of Irish mythology, which I think is really cool. A lot of people just kind of have trouble making that leap, but the people who have absolutely love this series. And I think it's because they're getting that blend of reality with the fantasy base. We have a whole veil that you have to go through to be able to get to our Netherworld, and they get to see behind the scenes. When people die, what happens to them? That's a huge question people ask. And so we went with the Irish theme of, our banshees don't, stand around and scream. They're not old hags or anything. There's a whole war going on the other side of the veil that people are like, oh, that's really cool. I never thought about that. And of course, our reapers are in leather and they're hot, and that doesn't hurt us at all.
That does not hurt.
Yes.
Yeah. And to pull in a human into this fantasy world so that this human is sort of able to be sort of the guide into this fantasy world. So we're seeing all of this world through the lens of a human, I think, is sort of an original take, that this is all new stuff. This isn't just an accepted, you have to grapple with this brand new reality. And why does this human see these mythical creatures that they're not supposed to be able to see? Like so we're trying to really push 2 boundaries together, which I think we do pretty well at.
I think we did good. Well, and it's really interesting from the Banshees standpoint of, they're in our world, but they're not part of our world. They're invisible unless, you're dying. So they experience our world differently than we do. So when they go back to their world, you know, it's almost, to us, it would be old world setup. You know, they don't have the cars and the airplanes and all of that kind of stuff. So it's really two fully different worlds coming together. And we made rules and we broke the rules. Yay, go us. So it's got action, it's got romance, it's got some gushiness. It's got battle scenes. Yay. Yeah, it's got some bloodiness. But it's also got really endearing characters. And the thing that I don't always do, I don't always buy into the happily ever after ending, but we were very kind.
We were.
And, you know, we were very nice to our characters, and I felt like we rounded it out very nicely. I don't like series that just kind of pull the rug out from underneath you and leave you going, but what
I just
now?
read 3 books and that's how you're ending it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that it's a completed series. Technically, we could, you know, do spinoffs if we wanted to, which would be kind of cool.
Right.
But at the same time, you can read the entire series and feel like, okay, I got all of my answers answered. I'm good. I'm happy. You know,
and it feels satisfying. I think. I think it feels like a satisfying, like, okay, that was worth the 3 books to get to this resolution. So, which is hard to do.
Well, yeah, and a lot of people, you know, they don't want to read a series until it's completed. Yeah. Because they don't want to have to wait, and you know it's done. So you can just buy all 3 and you can binge read to your heart's content.
Yeah, and I get that, you know, from a reader standpoint, and I'm the same way with things like that. But from a writer standpoint, if you're writing a series and the second book doesn't sell, you as an author say, well, apparently there's not any interest in this. I guess I won't finish the series. And so the series never gets made because the author thinks that there's no interest, when really it's people want it to be done before they buy. So it's a learning curve for authors too, to, you know, either write all of the things first and then release them, or understand that that's going to be how it plays out. So,
well, and there's definitely a difference between, typically romance is more individual books. Fantasy readers expect a series. And normally it's, we want 3 or more. Now, some series, you know, we're like, we want 15 of them because it's amazing.
Right.
But, you know, 3 is typically what people are looking for. So, you know, I think we did a great job rounding out the series, and I think people will really enjoy it when they give it a try. It definitely takes the Irish mythology and just kind of turns it on its head.
Yeah.
And we gave our own twist to it. So,
yeah. Now, before we go, if people are curious about you, Amy Miles, where do they go to find out more about you and your books?
Well, you can go to my website, which is www.amymilesbooks.com.
That's right. That's right. I just checked it this morning.
Yeah, I'm like, hang on a second. Yeah. I'm on Facebook and I love to hang out with people. So I typically actually friend people. So if you send me a friend request, I'm probably going to hang out with you and just chat. And I'm very down to earth and I'm obsessed with books. So I will chat books with you all day long when I'm supposed to be writing. So when my book takes a little bit longer to come out, you're the reason why. So yeah, I'm on Pinterest, although I need to update a few things. It's been a little while. I've been kind of like doing my secret board creating, because I'm working on a new cozy mystery series that I'm so excited about. And so I'm doing like the hidden board right now. So it's just for me.
Right.
Because I'll forget what characters look like.
I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. Well, that does it for us. So tune in next month when our theme will be young adult novels with guest Julie Cassar. This has been Danielle Bannister with fantasy guest Amy Miles for Writers on Writers. See you next time. Bye.